My cube
is good to me, and so I thank
my cube
for giving me the things I need, the sun and rain and an apple seed.
My cube's
Been good to me. I owe
my cube
so much for everything I see. I'm certain if it weren't for him, there'd be no apples on this limb.
My cube's
Been good to me. Oh, here am I, 'neath the blue, blue sky, a-doing as I please, singing with my feathered friends, falling with the bees. I wake up every day as happy as can be, because I know that with his care, my apple trees, they will still be there.
my cube
Is good to me.
Real quick before we get into this episode, as you can tell from the title of the episode, Justin Parnell is joining us this week, and we actually ended up having an almost 4-hour conversation with Justin that we decided afterwards to break up into 2 separate episodes. But we didn't know that when we were recording, and so I also thought this episode would come out a week later than it's actually coming out, all by way of saying we did not mention in this episode that this is the last week you can pre-order the CubeCon Cube Map print that we produced this year. This episode comes out Monday, October 2nd, and you have until Friday, October 6th to pre-order this poster if you want one. As a reminder, these are only for people that are attending CubeCon, so I know for most of you this does not matter, and I'm sorry for the interruption, but for those of you that are attending CubeCon, this is your last chance, and I really don't want anybody that wants a copy of this poster to miss out on their chance. So go to luckypaper.co/shop or check out a link in the show notes to pre-order that poster. Now enjoy the first half of our conversation with Justin Parnell. Anything else?
Nothing else.
Ready to go?
I'm ready.
Great. In that case, welcome to another episode of Lucky Paper Radio. My name is Andy. I'm here, as always, with my co-host, Anthony, star pupil of Spike University, Maddox.
I don't know if am I even in Spike University? Wait, what is Spike University? What's going on here?
This episode is Spike University.
Oh.
This is Spike University, Spiking Drafts 101, and I'm saying you're a star pupil. You 3-0'd last night in the Turbo Cube yet again.
I did. It was weird. I'm not
Why
used
was
to,
it weird?
I have to recontextualize my identity as someone who has beaten now all of the end bosses of the Turbo Cube in our local scene.
Yeah, I guess Allison wasn't in the pod last night, but
She
you
was,
beat
but
her
I
last
did beat her
time.
last time, so...
Yeah. Well, Anthony, if we're going to be at Spike University, we're going to need some help because you and I, we're fine Magic players, but I think we're known for things that are not our play. I think we bring more to the table than our skill at playing Magic. I think that's what people listen to this show.
That's a really, really diplomatic way to say it.
It's a nice way to put it. We're fine at Magic. But we have a special guest on this episode. Joining us, we have Justin, the headmaster of Spike University, Parnell. What's up, Justin?
Look, if my Magic play is what I'm known for, I really have a lot of brushing up to do in the other areas of my life because, I feel like I got a lot of room to grow 25 years in, so...
Oh, well, you're the headmaster. There's a lot of admin work that you do behind the scenes that's really important.
It's mostly admin work, mostly spreadsheets at this point.
Yeah, we've all got some room to grow, but you have handily trounced Anthony and I every time we've played. I used to track that in a spreadsheet, and it was a nice little column there of times lost to Justin. So and also you've been playing Cube for longer. Do you feel like you're an old head of the community? Do you feel like an elder of the Cube community at this point?
I mean, I definitely do, and it's weird because so I was in my. A place that I used to live, Wilmington, North Carolina, a few weeks ago. My parents live in Myrtle Beach, so I travel down to visit them about once a month. And I stopped in Wilmington and jumped into a cube draft with a bunch of old friends and people that I had not seen. We drafted the most current iteration of the Vintage Cube. And they were just telling me about all of these cubes that have popped up. And I'm just like, every place that I've gone, that I've lived in, for the last 15 years since I've been cubing, I can now look back and see all of these places in North Carolina and Virginia that I started the cube community there, and it's just grown, and it's literally every person that has grown that beyond me has been because I pushed those groups to do that. So I actually do have.
You're like QB Appleseed.
I was gonna say the same thing.
A little bit, yeah.
Or like Ice 9 of cubes that you're just leaving droplets of behind as you walk the...
That's exactly right. Yeah, it was really cool. And that was honestly like a kind of meaningful moment for me when I was like, I actually have made a difference. Like with this community and with this format for a decent amount of people, like in 2 states in the United States, which is pretty awesome.
That's awesome. I mean, it's especially cool that it's not just like, yes, I did this thing, I built it here and it sits, but it's like you had an influence on a community that has continued to develop. You sort of created some momentum that's grown beyond your original influence, it sounds like.
Yeah, significantly beyond it.
Which just means your influence is that much greater.
Yeah, I know, but I do feel like an old head now, because, I remember like when I started and we talked about this before, but like the people that I looked at as people that have been around that community, even though it was pretty small and new at the time, but now, I mean, I started cubing in 2008. That's 15 years ago.
Yeah,
that's a long time.
Yeah, I don't like thinking about time. It makes me feel weird. This episode we mentioned is like we said, Spike University. We are just talking about how to draft cubes, and we're talking about how to draft a specific subset of cubes. Do you want to share with the people the cubes we're talking about, Justin?
I do. So very exciting. So this is the first announcement of all of the cubes that we are going to be officially covering during the CubeCon weekend, and that is from October 19th through 22nd, and that is going to be on Twitch that you can watch, and I'm sure we'll put the link to that in the show notes. We're actually teaming up with NRG to do our broadcast production, and of course we have an excellent team of commentators that, Andy, you are one of them, as am I, and we have 4 others, David McDarby, Jonathan Brostoff, Emma Partlow, and Becky Bell, who are going to round out our team, and it's going to be super duper awesome. But this is the first time we've announced what cubes are going to be on coverage.
Yeah, we've got a great team of commentators, and also I'm there too, so it's going to be a fun time. In all seriousness, you've really stepped up the coverage this year, it seems like. I mean, last year was great. I think the coverage was fantastic. And really, it was just like Michael Hoyp, a.k.a. at CloudGoat Ranger, just ran the entire thing, basically, like it was a one-man show in terms of the like tech back end. And then you had organized all of the like commentators and stuff, but it was definitely like a little scrappy. And this year we've got NRG in the mix. We've got some professional commentators who I'm sure I mean you obviously are professional, but we also have Becky coming in from a professional esports commentary perspective, which will be very exciting. There's going to be floor correspondents. We're going to throw to somebody a correspondent on the floor to do live interviews with people, or after they 3-0 a draft. It's going to be great.
Yeah, I'm super excited. So. The cubes, do we want to go by one and talk about them, or do we want to just spill the beans right now and then like let people get excited? I don't know. It's your show. How do you want to do this?
I think we should list them just so people know what we're going to be talking about. And then, we do linked show notes for every episode of this podcast. So if you're listening on a podcast app that supports timestamps, then you'll be able to navigate to these different sections. If not, you can listen on our website and you can click around if you care about specific cubes. But yeah, why don't you run down all the cubes that are going to be featured, Justin?
Maybe we should also say up here at the top, because we always forget this, that we also have a cards mentioned page of every single card. So if you want to follow along, if we're not going to read the full rules text of everything, follow along there.
I expect a lot of cards to be mentioned in this episode.
Yeah, the wide swath of cubes being covered. So, in order, and we'll cover these in greater depth, but we are going to be featuring the Live the Dream Cube by David McDarby, and that was one that we actually featured on coverage last year, one of 2 that we are actually covering again for the 2nd year in a row. Then, Andy's Bun Magic Cube by Andy Mangold. I'm sure we will get some thoughts on that, but I also know that there's been a significant number of thoughts on that previously.
Mm-hmm. Yep, we do have a whole episode on that, so we'll probably touch on that one briefly, but maybe not go into as much depth as the other cubes.
Then we have Modern Darlings by Andrew Jabs. We have the Cartographia 2023 Cube by John Terrill. We have the Creative Cube by Mike Kerby. We have the Creatureless Cube by Ollie Davis. We have the Old Border Foil Cube by Jeff Green, who was also one that we featured last year, fan favorite. We have the Regular Cube by Anthony Maddox. And then Emma's Peasant Cube by Emma Partlow. And then we have a top 8 cube that is going to, we're not going to cover today. And I don't know if I want to keep that one a secret or not.
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe keep it a secret.
I could. Maybe I will. Maybe I won't.
Leave a little mystery. Leave a little mystery for the people. Let them try and figure out what the top 8 cube is going to be. But yeah, we're not covering that one. So we're just going to cover these 9 cubes, right? Did I count correctly? 9 cubes that we're talking about today.
And this is, I think, really exciting especially for the people that are going to be at CubeCon, but also for the rest of our listeners who are not necessarily going to CubeCon, but actually will have an opportunity to see all these cubes on this awesome coverage that's going to be, I believe, a lot of it live and then also available recorded after the fact.
Yeah, it's all going to be live. And then, Justin, do you know, are the videos going to be on like NRG's channel? Are they going to be on a CubeCon YouTube channel afterwards? What's the deal with the VODs afterwards?
They're going to be hosted on YouTube. Now, NRG will have the VODs if you want to watch them there, but if you want to watch them on YouTube, which is sometimes easier to navigate for people, we will have those uploaded. I would say it's not going to be immediate because sometimes there's a little bit of turnaround time, but within a week or so after the event. And TBD exactly where those are going to be. You know, like you said last year, it was a lot of like kind of hanging stuff together with strings, and you know, we're trying to get things a little bit more organized this year, so we might have a official CubeCon YouTube channel by then, hopefully. But you will be able to see every single cube that we are talking about today on coverage, and it's really like a fifth of the cubes, because we're going to have 50 cubes at CubeCon, which is crazy. That's over double the amount that we had last year. So I'm super excited. This is just like, really, this is just scratching the surface of everything that people are able to do. And I know you guys have talked about CubeCon. You went last year. You've been hyping it up on this show, but it truly is an incredible representation of the format with everything that we have.
Yeah, and I do want to reiterate what Anthony said. You know, I know that the vast majority of our listeners won't be attending CubeCon just because it's a pretty small event and we've got a decent listener base. So for most of you listening, you probably won't have a chance to draft these cubes, but we intentionally structured this episode to be useful to you as well, because I know a lot of people love watching paper cube coverage. There's not that much paper cube content out there, because I can say from experience, it's so much harder to make than, you know, recording your own draft on MTGO or Arena or whatever. And this is an opportunity to get more of that paper cube coverage. And really what we want to do in this episode is give you an introduction to all of these cubes, so that if you do sit down to watch the coverage live or watch the videos afterwards, you have some context for what you're watching. And then also take this as an opportunity to delve into our spikier sensibilities and just talk about how we would approach drafting these environments and trying to win. So that's the plan.
Yeah, I mean, that's pretty much my entire approach always. I might not be successful as much as I want to be, but with Cube, you know, this is like a casual format, but I still like approach it as competitively as possible. And I really love drafting and playing Cube, so this is honestly the type of thing I like to talk about more, even more so than design. Only because there's such a disparity in Cube content that's about design versus about playing Cube and being good at playing Cube. And I think that there's always can be more of that out in the world.
It's also just really hard to talk about being good at playing Cube, because Cube is so many things, and it's not just every deck that's different, but every draft experience is going to be a little bit different. So it's difficult to make that translation to make it useful to a broad group of people. But here we do get the opportunity to be really concrete and talk about how do we spike these 9 cubes.
Should we start with our first cube, Justin? I think it's a pretty well-known one, the Live the Dream cube.
It is. So the Live the Dream cube, this is David McDarby's cube. This is one, like I said, that we featured last year. It's been on Magic Online for, I think, 3 separate times, and is really a very beloved cube. When we were, the entire coverage team was deciding what cubes we wanted to cover this year, that we wanted to make sure that we showed as a great representation of the format, this was the only unanimous pick between all 7 of us, which is the 6 commentators and Michael, who's the kind of one of the executive producers, that we wanted to feature this cube. And it kind of speaks for itself. The goal of the cube is to create really synergistic, fun, high-level, goal-based gameplay. And when I say goal-based, I try to use that rather than saying live the dream, because this is, when David and I talk about this cube, that is always his goal in the design. And when you're drafting, you should be attempting to live the dream. You should identify a dream and then try to pull it off in the draft. Not only is that obviously really fun from a drafting perspective, but it often leads to a lot of success. I did a handful of drafts of each of these cubes earlier today, just in some prep, and every time that I draft the Live the Dream cube, which is one of my favorite cubes to draft, because I'm obviously good friends with David, so I draft this cube in person pretty much every chance I get. But there is always like a thing that I'm trying to do. And it's not just create a synergistic deck, but is create a synergistic deck with a goal to do a specific thing, to pull off a specific combo, to put together a specific collection of cards that is leading to like an apex in the game. And that is really what this cube is trying to do in its heart. And that, like I said, is reflected in the draft experience as well.
And there are tons of really ambitious combinations of cards in this cube that you can pull off woven through this list. I mean, it's a big cube, 540 cards, so you're going to be drafting a subset of it with a pod of 8 people. And within that subset of cards you open, there's going to be just, countless number of potential combinations of cards that will do something weird and synergistic and out there. A bunch of dreams you can choose from to live.
Yeah, and by dreams you mean big splashy spells, exciting things, but especially things that take a little bit of setup that sort of give you that little mini game. When I drafted this last time, I drafted Niv Mizzet, the 5-color that meant my whole deck was full of gold cards, and that's just such a clear sort of signpost about
your dream is draw 10 cards.
Try and draw 10 cards.
I drafted on Cube Cobra, I did a little sample deck where the dream I was trying to live was to hit someone with this Warhammer creature. I don't remember the name. It's Tzangor Shaman. And
sure,
when it deals damage to a player,
that's one that missed me.
That's whenever it deals damage to a player, the next instant or sorcery you cast this turn, you cast it, you copy it, and cast it again. So hit him with the Shaman and then cast Cruel Ultimatum. That's the dream that I wanted to live with that deck.
Did you do
everything was leading. I did it in the draft on Cube Cobra. I 3-0'd that one for sure.
It was the Cube Cobra draft. Okay, I thought you were telling a story from a real draft.
Oh God, I wish I could have taken that deck and just set it aside, and then when we get together, that should be a thing. Like everyone does independent Cube Cobra drafts, and we just bring a bunch of extra copies of cards and just jam them in decks in case there's crossover. You just pick your draft 5 decks and pick your favorite. That's a whole different thing. I'm going to tangent on that. Anyway, that was the dream I was trying to live with that deck. Is I wanted to copy Cruel Ultimatum by hitting him with this creature. So it was like this Spellslinger deck, but it had this incredible top end where I'm trying to cast this game-ending spell, and it could have been something like that. Maybe in the future it could be like Casualties of War. I'm trying to copy a Casualties of War. I don't know. This cube it's so much fun. The thing that is the most fun to me in cube drafting, though, is something that is replicated very well in this cube, and that is the mana base is pretty expansive. And those are always the things that I go to. Andy, I know you and I feel differently about triomes.
Yeah, we do. It's true.
And we're never going to get past that.
We don't have time to unpack this here. We don't have time to get into it
eternally. But this cube has got them, and obviously we're talking about it from a drafting perspective, not from a design perspective.
That's right, and I will have nothing to say other than draft triomes because they're powerful.
They're good.
Yes, because they are, let me tell you, they are quite powerful in this cube. It is so easy to splash and try to create these combinations of colors, but more so, this cube is not fast. That doesn't mean there can't be aggressive decks, but this is not you need to establish the board by turn 3. That is when you are starting to play your more powerful cards is on turn 3. But you have the first 2 turns to set up your mana, and that, in my opinion, is the best thing that you can do in this cube, and spending those early draft picks to set up your mana, because that is where the phase of the game that is used for, specifically in this cube, compared to every other cube that we're going to be talking about today. This is the cube where you have the time to do so. And if you avoid doing that and are just playing a bunch of basic lands, you're not going to be able to take advantage of the fact that you can change that untappedness into speed and then, velocity from there to really get under your opponent. That's something that's really incredible to do. And in my opinion, not something that is always going to lead or often going to lead to a positive draft record when you do it.
Yeah, I think that's a really critical point about this cube is not only are there a lot of dreams to live, but that's actually what is optimal. It is best to do that. And that's really clear when we just look at the distribution of cards. The average mana value in this cube of non-land cards is over 4, which
preposterous.
We're going to look at some other cubes here that are going to be very, very different from that. But that just means you can cast your 3, 4, 5, 6, 8 mana value spells and actually just win games on the back of that. It's also interesting even just looking at the distribution of some other things. Most of the cubes we're going to see have more instants than sorceries. This is actually the opposite. There's just a lot of sorceries. Everything's happening at sorcery speed for the most part, which means, you just have the time and space to be doing these big splashy things.
And I think this is a really interesting case study in what facets make an environment amenable to multicolored decks, because this cube actually has, of all the featured cubes, the lowest number of lands by ratio. It's only got 12% of the cube as lands, which is close to the lowest number of fixing lands as well. But to your point, Justin, it's not really about how many lands you have in your deck in terms of whether you can splash or play, a third or fourth color in your mana base. It really comes down to how much time do you have to find that mana source, right? And here, you don't need an overabundance of fixing lands in order to find your sources to cast your 7-mana spell, because you have all the turns prior to that 7-mana spell being castable in order to find and fix your mana. So
this cube also has a lot of non-land fixing as well. So it's got
mana
signets
rocks and
things
stuff like that.
Right.
Yeah.
And I really like that you brought up that it's 12%. However, even though it is and I'm putting air quotes around low percent, it's just, kind of comparatively to some of the other cubes we might be talking about, I would bet that the conversion of lands drafted to lands being played in decks is on the high end for this cube.
I think that's absolutely true, yeah.
When we talk about your cube is kind of like shifted to the opposite end of the spectrum of this cube.
It's kind of the polar opposite in a lot of ways, yeah.
It really is, yeah. But you have a lot of lands in your cube, like a really high amount of lands accessible. But the lands that are in the cube don't necessarily relate to all of the lands that make the decks, because speed is such a big factor in your cube. And here, it's not. So all of the lands you can draft is actually just an opportunity for you to splash a card, because you're always going to have time to be able to do that. One of the things that is really difficult for me to avoid constantly whenever I draft this cube is to avoid drafting 5-color. That doesn't mean I make sure I don't do it, but it's so easy to do it, and there's so many things that are very tempting to pull you in different directions that it's easy to just have a 5-color soup deck that you're like, I'm just going to cast all these really powerful cards, and you don't actually have kind of a coherent game plan to get towards that in-game scenario that you're trying to create, to live that dream, so to speak. So the lands they're not few, but they're all valuable in the case that the vast majority of them are actually going to get played in decks. So
yeah, I mean, even just comparing triomes to regular dual lands, if I'm just playing a 2-color deck and there are all triomes going around, more of those lands are going to end up in decks where it can actually be played.
Okay, we don't have to defend triomes anymore, okay?
Triomes are beloved, and you know how I feel. You know how I feel about them.
I recognize that I'm, for the most part, on the losing side of the Triumph perspective. Most people really love them, and I understand why. So
true.
Makes sense.
One of my favorite cards to draft in this cube. So first of all, you can draft Golos in this cube. Golos is obviously very, very good. You can not draft his BFF, Field of the Dead, but the good news is you can activate Golos pretty easily. One of my favorite cards to draft in this cube that I actually think is a really, really sneaky, crazy powerful build-around card is a Planeswalker, one of like 48 Planeswalkers. This cube has, I'm sure, the highest density of Planeswalkers of any cube that we're going to talk about. I have no doubt it is. I don't even have the data on that. But
yeah, most
I'm
Planeswalkers
sure
kind of have a built-in dream, which is just ultimate it. So that's a nice way to get a lot more dreams into the cube by card density.
That's right. Yeah, more dream per capita is in this cube.
Mm-hmm.
And the dream that I want to live the most, that I actually think is really powerful from a drafting perspective, is Kaya the Inexorable. I don't know how familiar you guys are with the ultimate of Kaya.
I am not.
Because most of the time, most of the time you're just like a little value machine. You're going to protect your creatures, make them come back, you're going to exile stuff. So Kaya starts at 5 loyalty for 5 mana, has a +1, a -3, and a -7. The -7 is what I want to talk about, because the -7 says you get an emblem with, at the beginning of your upkeep, you may cast a legendary spell from your hand, from your graveyard, or among cards you own in exile without paying its mana cost.
And a lot of those running around too.
Yeah, if you were to hazard a guess how many legendary things there are in this cube, it's probably I don't even know, but I bet it's a significant amount. And Kaya is one of the easiest in-game engines that you can do, because all you have to do is protect it for 2 turns, and it's almost impossible to lose. There's so many legendary things, including immediately casting Kaya back after you ultimate her. You could just cast her immediately the next turn. But it's one of the easiest ways to live a very powerful dream in this cube that, again, because of the sometimes lack of aggression, is really, really hard to deal with and disrupt. There's a whopping 9.89% of this cube is Planeswalkers.
That is a lot.
Almost as many Planeswalkers as there are lands.
So it's slightly less because that's a percentage of the non-land cards that are played.
Okay.
That's how I do
right.
my math.
Yeah.
That's what the NL means. Makes sense.
Yeah, that would be crazy though. That'd be a wild cube. So the decks that I have success with, and I actually have had a decent amount of success drafting this cube. And this is going to sound obvious when I say it out loud, but the most powerful cards in this cube cost 2 and 3 mana because it's so easy.
Are they signets and other mana rocks?
No. It's all the interaction spells.
Oh, interesting.
So
okay.
there's still Lightning Bolt. There's still Kolagon's Command. There's still, Tear Asunder. There's Deputy Detention. Just kind of going through all of these interaction spells, all these removal spells. This is the way that I actually have the most success in this cube, is by kind of, I don't want to say ignoring, but the 4 and 5 mana stuff, I always try to keep that to a minimum because the cards are all so powerful. Like there's not many cards in this cube that cost 4 and 5 mana that aren't going to have a dramatic impact on the game. So those cards are not cards that I look for, even if they're like really, really tempting. Now, of course, obviously, if you're in a specific strategy, if you're trying to play like a sacrificey deck, you want, you see a Lulth Spider Queen and you're like, okay, well, this is the exact fit in my deck. I'm not saying don't pick one of those, but it seems like the interaction doesn't go a long way in this cube because it's very value-oriented. The mana curve goes very high. As we said, the average mana value of non-land cards is over 4, which I would also guess could potentially be the highest in all of the cubes at CubeCon.
I believe I saw on a tweet from Magic the Gathering Data Science today that is in fact the case. Live a Dream Cube has the highest mana value of anything in the entire event.
See, I didn't even know that. I believe it though. But my decks are often 2 mana, 3 mana, a couple of 4, a couple of 5s, and then like 3 or 4 6-drops. Well, probably like 4 to 6, 6 and 7 drops. Because those are the ways that you're going to live that dream, but still making sure that you have all of that cheap stuff is even more critical in this cube, in my opinion, to have a successful draft. So those are the things I always like to pick extremely highly, like even more so. I don't want to necessarily say even more so than lands, but I think that those cards are at even higher power level here than they are in a lot of other cubes, but they look less powerful than they are in there. That is not the case. So don't shy away from Lightning Bolt just because it looks like everything's got 4 toughness, because I can assure you Lightning Bolt still will always find a way. It's much like Jurassic Park. Okay, Lightning Bolt's always going to find a way.
Pretty hard to figure out a game state where Lightning Bolt is not going to be pretty useful in the game of Magic the Gathering.
Right. Yeah, it's just, when you're casting Cruel Ultimatums, sometimes people are like, well, I don't want Lightning Bolts, I want Cruel Ultimatum. So you still want Lightning Bolts most of the time. Well, remember, there's a Lightning Bolt attached to Cruel Ultimatum.
Why not both? Both is great. I gotta admit, I am really quite bad at this kind of Magic. This is not the kind of Magic that I thrive at, and I'm not as experienced playing this kind of Magic. So I have a question for you, Justin. There's a lot of cards in this cube that strike me as very committal build-arounds, in the sense that they are dream-living cards, but they do nothing on their own. Like, a card like Doubling Season. It's 5 mana for an enchantment that doesn't do anything until you play some other card that, keys off of what it cares about. How playable are those cards here? Are you ever living dreams where you're combining cards that are 4, 5, 6 mana that don't do anything on their own and have to be combined with other cards to be good? Or are you trying to live more conservative dreams with, like, decent fail cases?
No, I would say that it's actually pretty common that you're combining those over 4 mana cards to live your dream collectively. I mean, one Doubling Season is a great example, because a Doubling Season plus a Planeswalker can mean a very quick-lived dream.
Right.
And often, the game could potentially end shortly after that. Now,
Doubling Season into Kaya is probably lights out, because if you have more Planeswalkers in your deck, you just get to cast them for free. It's pretty messy.
Right. Yeah, and you just start ultimating them. I mean, Kaya's just that again. That's one of my favorite cards in the entire cube. But I would say that's actually pretty common. Is combining your 4 and 5 mana cards to create a combination of how those cards work. Because there's not that's not something that's explored most of the time in a limited setting or cube draft or anything from a kind of a more competitive sense. Most of those things live in Commander when you're combining these really expensive cards. So this cube is done in a way that combinations don't often exist outside of Commander, but you have the opportunity to do that. Even something like Yuriko, the Tiger Shadow, like that's not something that's generally playable in Cube, but because the mana curve goes so high, making sure that you draft Yuriko and then draft things that cost like 6 and 7, and having that a meaningful part of your game plan, like that's a legitimate thing. Having like Vincer, the Sojourner, and like Titan of Industry, you're like, this is how I'm going to specifically end the game, or like Vincer and Dragonlord Atarka, and that's across like 4 colors, but that's something that's incredibly realistic to happen. So those type of things should not only are good, but should actually be your game plan to do, and trying to synergize these really high mana value cards, because again, you're going to have time to do it.
Right. We've talked about the virtues of 3 and 4 color decks. How often do you end up just playing 2 colors straight up and down in this cube? Is that a thing that is viable or not really?
So viable, yes. You have to be really focused. And I would say it is not something that new drafters to this cube do very often, because there's so many flashy things. Every pack you turn, you're encouraged to draft more colors than you currently have. So I don't think it's possible to draft a single color deck in this cube. That's completely out the window.
Monocolor does not seem like a thing here.
Yeah. I do think that, actually, I don't even know that... I don't want to say possible. Every 2-color combination is possible. I don't know that they're all good, but that's only because I have not tried to put together every 2-color combination, but I have done a handful. Like, you can get pretty low to the ground with like a white-black deck that focuses around tokens and like kind of cheap interaction. And I think those might be 2 of the like lowest curved colors in the cube. And black is, in my experience, is one of the kind of premier aggro colors, and I'm really putting air quotes on that. Aggro in the sense of this cube, not aggro in the sense of a traditional cube.
Yeah, aggro is always relative.
I think like, something in the Mardu scope, if you're like white-red, black-white, black-red, those are probably the decks you can realistically work with as exactly 2 colors. I think when you add blue and green, there's just so much that encourages you to be more than 2 colors, whether it be card draw or card filtering or ramp or things that are frequently touching into other colors. Like a lot of the really powerful gold cards are green and blue. So I would say if you're in any combination of the Mardu, it's more possible to convert that into a winning record. Where if blue is one of your colors or green is one of your colors, you're probably going to be drafting 3+.
We're going to close each of these conversations about each cube with a pack one, pick one, which we'll try and keep brief just to put our newfound knowledge to the test. So we got a pack here from the Live the Dream cube, which I'll read the cards and then we'll save your answer for the end, Justin, because I think you'll know what is more correct to take here, but I'm curious to hear what Anthony and I are drawn to. And again, this is a good opportunity to remind people we do have that visual spoiler on our website if you want to just look at all these packs as you're listening and follow along. But this pack is Doubling Season, Solitude, Chart a Course, Hostage Taker, Dimir Signet, Eminatu's Augury, Overgrown Tomb, Baral and Karizev, The Immortal Sun, Unburial Rites, Mawlock, Wormcoil Engine, Volcanic Island, Selesnya Signet, and Mind Stone. Anthony, after everything we talked about, what are you taking out of this pack for the Live the Dream Cube? What dream do you want to live?
So the dream that I want to live here is Doubling Season. Is the best way for me to get to that dream, or get to a dream actually just to take a Signet? And I think maybe the right choice is just to take a Signet, and I'm kind of stuck there. Or do I take Solitude, and thinking of that as like a cheap interaction spell, which I know is pretty rare, maybe I should just start there. That's it. I'm taking Solitude. I did it. I talked myself into it.
Based on the conversation we just had, I am also drawn to Solitude, with a small shout out to both Hostage Taker and Mawlock for filling a similar role of like, it's a threat, it's an answer to whatever dream your opponent is trying to live. I think you can't beat Solitude on rate, and on the off chance they're able to do some sort of fast dream, the idea that you could actually evoke it to stop their thing is very appealing to me. So I think I'm also on Solitude. Now, how wrong are we, Justin?
I'm on Solitude pretty easily, actually. For all of the reasons that I said earlier, the cheap interaction is still the most critical thing in this cube, and Solitude not only is I mean, in the year of our Lord 2023, I think it's safe to say that Solitude is probably one of the top 50 Magic cards that exist.
It's pretty powerful.
And it is in this cube. Now, I will say, the other two cards I would look at in this pack, let's say Solitude wasn't here and it was replaced with basic Plains, the worst land I could think of.
The worst Magic card you could conceive of.
Yeah, the two cards I would be looking at would be Moloch, because just an incredibly powerful card. It scales incredibly well, card advantage in two different ways. And Doubling Season, because, well, there's no Planeswalkers in this pack. If you start with Doubling Season and you build your deck around kind of a Planeswalker control card, you have an automatic I win button, because it's one of the easiest dreams to live, and again, you're going to have time to do it. So those are the three cards I would be looking at. But yeah, Solitude is the way here.
So Signets are not that high on your list as far as like first picks.
Not for first picks. They're still hive picks, but this pack really provides either a strong direction with a signpost card like Doubling Season, or some of the most efficient creatures / removal spells in Solitude and Moloch. So because those are present, I know that those are premium compared to Signets. And let's be real, there's 3 of them in this pack. We get 2 Signets and a Mind Stone. Now, I would hope one of those would come back around. That would be great. It would be a great day for me if one of these came back around after I took the Solitude. But yeah, it's not something I'm looking at for a first pick, because I really want impact. And honestly, this could be counterintuitive, and this is my personal draft strategy. I probably cut Mana Rocks and Signets from my decks in this cube more frequently than most people, just because I want.
Interesting. So you don't think it's as much about the tempo and playing your big bomb a turn ahead of time. It's about, you'd rather just have interaction and actually be able to stop your opponent and then do your big dream.
Yeah, let me have 2 bombs and you can have 1 bomb and a Signet.
Right.
Sure.
Yeah. The classic flip your deck over inevitability does seem like it matters a lot more the slower the gameplay is. And this may be the slowest cube at CubeCon. So, yeah, you want that flip your deck over inevitability.
Yeah. So it's not that they're bad, and I still draft them, but I find like when I'm in I got to figure out my 23rd card, like the mana ramp often is cut in lieu of higher impact cards. So that's just my experience with this.
All right, so tune in to the CubeCon coverage on Thursday early afternoon if you want to see that dream lived live and watch that draft. We took some great care, I think, when we arranged the coverage schedule, and the second Cube draft that day is My Bun Magic Cube, which I gotta say, in basically every way, is like the polar opposite of the Live the Dream Cube. So anybody that tunes in and watches the full stream on Thursday will get a wide sampling of what Magic has to offer, because by comparison to the Live the Dream Cube, My Bun Magic Cube is one of the lowest curving cubes at CubeCon. It is one of the highest fixing density cubes at CubeCon, and it's all about playing lean, mean, efficient, fair Magic. So there really aren't that many dreams to be lived in My Bun Magic Cube. I can't think of many things I would describe as a dream. It's really more about just a very zero-sum, heads-up trading of resources. I try and emulate fair legacy decks basically in how this cube plays out.
I mean, I think the dreams that are to be lived here are about much smaller edges, about, I drafted correctly so I didn't get a little bit more mana screwed than my opponent, and I used my removal spell on the correct target, or kept my counterspell up on the correct turn, things like that are going to be difficult to see, I think, which is going to be interesting. I think there's going to be a lot of great visible gameplay, but I think there is going to be a long tail of depth to the kind of gameplay here.
Yeah.
You guys should have Andy, you edit these. You should have a little ding when Anthony says long tail.
Oh, I actually do literally have that.
Okay, perfect. Okay.
I literally have I recorded it myself, a little service bell ding that I play gently in the background whenever we say any of our
great minds,
our dumb keywords.
Okay, good. Just want to make sure.
As I said, we did just record an entire episode, which will come out 2 weeks prior to this episode, all about how to draft this cube. So if you want a deep dive, you should go check that out. The very high-level stuff, which we'll cover very quickly here, is, like I said, low curving, fair magic. There is nothing that I deem to be unfair, which is anything that really just kind of breaks the natural progression of the game from low resource to high resource. You don't get to reanimate something in this cube because I consider that unfair. You don't get to go infinite in any way because I consider that unfair. So everything is all about this attrition and value and trading resources with your opponent and deciding where and how to use your removal and trade-off in combat to make things matter. It is a 360 card cube, so the whole thing is going to be drafted, though the event that is being covered at CubeCon is actually going to be a 6-player team draft of this cube, so we won't be seeing the entire list on coverage, but we'll see most of it in a sort of team draft context, which I think this cube is pretty well suited to.
Briefly, do you have a different strategy with team draft than a normal 8-person pod with this cube?
That's going to be my question.
This is an eternal question when it comes to Cube in general. I really think a lot of the team draft dynamics of trying to figure out what your two opponents to your left and right are in and making sure you don't pass them a huge bomb for their deck, I think a lot of those factors really are minimized in Cube Draft because the delta between the best and least powerful card in almost every cube is going to be a lot narrower than in Retail Limited. When we talk about team drafting a regular Retail Limited set, quick, Justin, what's a bomb from Wilds of Eldraine? Retail Limited bomb from Wilds of Eldraine.
Like any mythic rare?
I'm just saying name one. I don't play Retail Limited these days, so just pick one.
Okay, Talion the Kindly Lord.
That's blue-black, right?
Blue-black, yeah. Blue-black fairy that drains your opponent and draws you a card whenever they play something for a certain number, which is almost always 2.
Right, so in a team draft of a Retail Limited set, if you are drafting your pack 1 and you think you have a decent idea that you've put the person you're passing to in blue, or you think, if I were passing to another clone of me, I would have taken these good blue and black cards because I passed them decent blue and black cards even though I was taking slightly better cards for my red-green deck or whatever. When you open that Talion in pack 3 and you're passing it to that player that you have a decent idea might be playing blue-black, it is absolutely correct for you in team draft to hate draft that Talion. Take nothing for your deck, but don't let your opponent have a huge bomb for their deck because in team draft, all that matters is that your team gets the most wins. It doesn't actually matter your individual performance. So if you can make their deck more worse, then your deck will be better by taking a card for your deck. You should do that.
Yeah, I've been team drafting for a long time, like even before I cube drafted. And I've definitely had people decide to stump for the team, and then the team wins the draft. Because you don't talk during a team draft, but you can discuss strategy beforehand, of course. Mm-hmm. And you can just have someone just kind of suck up everything that is not in the lanes that people are likely to go. And that can be a viable strategy in Retail Limited. It can
you know what? That
be
person might still win a couple games. That person might still win a couple games in Retail Limited because, there's variance in Magic. Your opponent might get mana screwed, and maybe you're a deck that's just your, deck you kind of intentionally torpedoed a little bit just to throw the table off. You win a couple games too. So yeah. I think...
Real tough in Cube, though. Real tough.
It's really tough in Cube because, first of all, you are never going to open a pack where there's a card that is so much better than the next best card in that pack for your opponent's deck, especially in a cube like the Bun Magic Cube, where, again, there are no combos. I can definitely see in Cube Team Draft, if you passed Deceiver Exarch and Pestermite and you open Splinter Twin, don't risk your opponent getting their combo piece. There's nothing like that in this cube, though. There's a lot of replaceable kind of effects. You're just going to be taking the A+ for your opponent to get the A for their deck instead, and you gave up a whole pick for your deck for that reason. So, for me, I actually barely draft differently when we team draft this cube. And we've done it quite a few times. Obviously, there's all the other elements of team draft, like getting to build your deck with your teammates and getting to help out in gameplay. That's really fun and dynamic, and I love team drafting for that reason. I do think for this cube, my own assessment has been that I guess if there's nothing in the pack for me, then I'm more likely to hate something I think my opponent is playing, or if there's a tiebreaker pick where I'm between two things and I think one of those choices might interfere with my opponent, then I'll lean that direction. But I rarely think that you're adopting that whole let's just hate draft strategy and having success with it in a cube like this.
Are there any number of cards, any handful of cards, you feel like in a team draft setting that you are more likely to first pick there as compared to a regular draft? Because I have a couple that I feel like I would, but I'm curious to hear what you would say.
I don't think my first pick, certainly my first pick order, I don't think changes. Maybe how willing I am to switch into something, pick 3 or pick 4. I might be a little more willing to switch into something at that point, because if I'm if I see Uro pick 4 or something, I don't know how that would have happened. I got to have a talk with my teammates after the draft. But if I see Uro pick 4 and I'm deep in red-black, I'm probably just taking the Uro because I don't want to give it to the person pick 5, right? I just can't let him have it that late. But other than maybe being a little more willing to jump ship and like pivot halfway through pack 1 or something, I don't think my pick order really changes. So I'm really curious to hear how your evaluations change in a team draft context.
Yeah, so there are a couple of cards that I would evaluate a little bit differently in a team draft context in this cube in particular. And the reason for that is exactly what you said kind of when we were leading on this, is there is a lot of information to be had for early picks because, some of the most important things are, well, what came around second? What did I open out of my pack that you never saw in your pack when it got to you? Because you're sitting alternatingly. And in my opinion, some of the most powerful things are the game changing, the game dynamic changing cards. And one of the very best cards in any cube, but especially this cube, in my opinion, that does that is Thalia, Guardian of Thraben. This is going to put you obviously in a very white aggressive deck, but it's very difficult for people to contextually draft without the knowledge of Thalia potentially being there or not. So, to me, this is one of the most powerful first picks that you could do, even though it might contextually, like in the entirety of the cube, it might not be something that you're looking to, like, first pick in an average pack. That could be debatable. I think Thalia is really powerful, especially in a low CMC cube where people are trying to double spell frequently.
Right.
But it's one of those cards that people can't prepare for when they are building their decks. If they don't know it exists, it's difficult for them to prepare as a team. When you're drafting individually, you're kind of like, I'm going to be a little bit prepared for everything, right? But when you're drafting with a team and you're building your decks together, you're talking about what you saw from the other team, what was passed by.
Right.
And that's one of those cards that's like, if people don't know they have it, they could build their decks slightly wrong. And as we know, when you built your deck slightly wrong and then someone has a Thalia on turn 2, you may have built your deck a lot of wrong.
Gotcha.
So there are specific cards you would look for to say, if I pass this, I'm going to ask my teammates if they have it, and if not, we're all going to be prepared for our opponents having it.
That is exactly right.
And
basically, when I open a pack, I'm going to look and say, what are the 4 most powerful cards in this pack, and then I'm going to quiz my teammates if they saw them.
Right. And also, you're saying that if you take that Thalia pick 1, then your opponents never saw it. So again, we're only drafting 3/4 of the cube in a team draft. Your opponents might also just think that Thalia wasn't opened, and so they don't know that they should build their decks knowing that 1/3 of their matches are going to be against a Thalia deck.
Right. And because there's plenty of like powerful cards like Skull Clamp and like Smuggler's Copter. Like those are powerful cards, but if you have Smuggler's Copter, like that's not causing you to build your deck differently. You're going to build your deck exactly the same whether someone has Smuggler's Copter or not. Thalia, however, is like changes the dynamic. So that's one of those cards that I really think improves its value a lot in a team draft setting.
Yeah, I do think that the team deck building and basically, pre-sideboarding for your 3 matches that you're going to have, you're looking around them saying, all right, well, our team drafted these colors, our opponents must be in these colors, what bombs did we pass them? That, I think, is a very real dynamic in team drafting cube that carries over from Retail Limited perfectly well.
Yeah, there's just like a lot of different archetypes. You can say, okay, after the draft, looks like we have 2 aggressive decks. We don't even know that there was necessarily a 3rd highly aggressive deck, but if there is, there's only one person. We can probably identify who that is. And then you could build your deck based on that. But like those first picks in each of the packs, especially the very first pick, is very, very powerful because it lets you have true hidden information where the rest of the draft sometimes can be pieced together by players that know what's going on.
Yeah, and good team drafters will do this. Like, this is, like, if you've never team drafted before, you've only done it once or twice, you might think that this is not really realistic, but this is what good team drafters do. They will definitely pick apart and analyze the draft and know what you're doing when they sit down to build with their teammates.
So I'm excited. I'm really excited to cover this one.
It's going to be a really interesting chaser to the Live the Dream Cube because, it's going to be very, very different kind of draft and very, very different kind of gameplay.
I think one of the biggest ways to just call out that difference is I ran some other numbers, and 4% of the Live the Dream non-land cards are 1 mana value cards, and in the Bun Magic Cube, it's 35%. That's just like a world of difference. I think that really speaks to how different these environments are.
Yeah, one of the ways I describe this cube in a nutshell is like your deck should have a turn 1 plan. Like turn 1, decisions are being made about the progression of the game that are going to affect the outcome, where you're going to have, fork choices of, do I, hold up this counterspell, or do I, go and fetch a shock land and have it come in tapped, or do I, have this removal spell at the hand, or do I bolt the bird or not? All these questions come up as early as turn 1 in this cube, which is a stark difference to the Live the Dream cube, where we basically said you've got 2 to 3 turns to just go play your signets, cast your rampant growths, get set up in order to actually start slinging spells at each other. The other things I would say in a nutshell, don't underestimate cheap removal in this cube. There's a lot of things like Thalia running around. You saw what percentage of the cube is 1 mana value. You're going to want to be able to remove your opponent's cheap threats, and there's not a ton of big stuff here. So your cheap removal, your disfigures and whatnot, will actually remove a decent chunk of all the threats in the cube. It's not just the small ball stuff. And the other thing I would say is basically plan for a small game, high removal context. Look at cards that are going to be good in a context where there's a lot of trading of resources and the graveyards are growing and people are taking a lot of game actions. The most concise way to describe this is I've had people ask me, and we've mentioned on the podcast, about Regal Bunnicorn, this new 1 and a white card that is as big as all of the non-land permanents you control, and whether that card is good in the Bun Magic Cube or not. Comparing it to Tarmogoyf. Tarmogoyf is a card I think is great in this cube. I think it's maybe among the best it can be. Certainly looking at the cubes at CubeCon, it's hard to imagine a cube where Tarmogoyf is better than a cube like this. The Bunnicorn, by comparison, plan for this to be your only threat in play, and Tarmogoyf is great as your only threat, because you and your opponent have both traded a bunch of resources, you've removed their stuff, there's a bunch of stuff in the graveyards, now you have a giant Tarmogoyf. The Bunnicorn is your only threat in play is 1/1, so, even though they're superficially both 2-drops that can have big power and toughness, they play out very differently, and you should definitely be planning for the Tarmogoyf side of the spectrum, rather than the Bunnicorn side of the spectrum, in every evaluation of all your cards in this cube.
Yeah, well said. I totally agree about Tarmogoyf too. I also really just love drafting cubes where Tarmogoyf is good. Not just from a nostalgia point of view, but it's I'm really using every piece of the Buffalo to make this Tarmogoyf good.
Yeah, it's really fun. I even have a special Tarmogoyf die I'm including in my cube box for CubeCon so that everyone can have a little dice that has the right numbers on it.
I don't know if the judges are going to manage extra paraphernalia.
Well, we'll see. I'll make sure it actually gets to the coverage table, at least on the coverage.
To the coverage table,
yeah.
Sure.
Assuming Tarmogoyf's in the pack. All right, let's do a quick pack one, pick one from the Bun Magic Cube. Again, this is just the first random pack that Justin generated, and this pack contains Falconwrath Pitfighter, Urza's Bauble, Sylvan Library, Llanowar Elves, Mother of Runes, Polluted Delta, Brainstorm, Firebolt, Adeline Resplendent Cathar, Soulscar Mage, Zurgo Bellstriker, Grim Flayer, Flooded Strand, Blade Splicer, and Collective Brutality. I think this is kind of a tough pack. I see 4-ish cards I would be very happy to take early, but nothing that's like a windmill slam. Anthony, you've played this cube a bunch. What are you taking?
Well, I'm looking around the table, and Justin Parnell sitting over there, so I feel like there's a pretty good chance I'm going to be able to draft green-white without fighting for it. So I'm just going to take Flooded Strand or Mother of Runes. It's close for me. I think I'm between those two. I'm just going to slam Mother of Runes.
Justin, you've never played this cube, but what are you taking out of this pack?
I mean, we're probably going to take Polluted Delta, but if I wanted to be more fun,
we're here to win.
We're here to win? Well, that's the thing. I think I could win with either of these cards. I think Polluted Delta is the safe pick if I've never drafted the cube and I haven't opened and really evaluated the cube before. But I think Adeline Resplendent Cathar is one of the KO cards here. I think it's probably it's one of the best threats in most cubes that it's in, and this cube is so low to the ground. This thing is just an absolute monster. It has high toughness. It's going to be tougher to remove. So I think if I opened it on the day, it would be between Delta and Adeline. So despite you thinking I'm not going to be drafting white-green cards, Adeline is a card that makes me question that.
Foiled
and
again.
I love Blade Splicer too. Yeah,
it's also relevant.
But I think Adeline, yeah.
It's also relevant that Adeline is one of the few cards in this cube that does just add a bunch more resources to the board. So it is unique in that aspect, so I think that makes it a lot more valuable.
It's a big game card.
I didn't want to say it, but...
Ding, 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 ding. Yeah, I think the two fetch lands are both very respectable. Here is nothing that jumps out to me as you should take this over a fetch land if you have the opportunity to. The cards I'm looking at are Mother of Runes, Sylvan Library, and Brainstorm. I think both these cards, Brainstorm and Sylvan Library, get a lot better with the high density of fetch lands. I do break Singleton for fetch lands here, so there are 21 in total with the one Prismatic Vista running around. And both these cards get a lot better there. Brainstorm specifically is a little more replaceable because there are a lot of 1-mana cantrips here, so how much better is the best 1-mana cantrip? Is it worth taking over a fetch land when the fetch land's almost guaranteed to make your deck? I'm not sure. Sylvan Library is kind of singular. There's not a card you can directly compare that to that generates a ton of value over the length of the game. So I think any one of those 5 cards, with Polluted Delta and Flood Estuarine being kind of one card, is totally defensible. But also, can you start an Adeline? Absolutely. Adeline is also not replaceable in this cube. There's not another 3-drop that does what Adeline does, and that's also by design. I don't like having the replaceable 3 and 4-drop stuff. I like a lot of replaceable stuff at 1 mana so I can have a high density of certain types of effects. Once you get to the higher end of the spectrum on the curve, I really like to spice things up a little bit and give you a variety of things you can do. I guess just to be different, I'll take Sylvan Library and say that's what I'm going to do.
I always have to ask myself the question with Sylvan Library, though, of do I actually want to
play?
Do you
want to play
Sylvan Library?
Exactly.
And if I was on coverage, not really. That'd be an easy way for me to look dumb.
That's fair. So Anthony's taken the Mother of Runes, assuming that white and green cards aren't going to get taken.
Exactly, and I've gotten just hosed. All right, well, next up, we're going in another pretty different direction, talking about the Modern Darlings Cube by Andrew Jabs. So we've talked about the big, huge dreams, very fast, ruthless, efficient magic. This is a different environment that's focused on trying to sort of recreate a particular environment, which was modern sort of in its beginnings around Magic Origins. So it's really leaning into try and recreate a bunch of the kinds of decks that you would expect to see in that time. So really leaning into the nostalgia for people that played Modern. So we have things like black-white tokens and Splinter Twin and Affinity for Artifacts, Infect, all kinds of things. And it's sort of an interesting take on that because it is trying to lean into a bunch of these archetypes, make these strategies stand out, but it is still mostly singleton. There's a few breaks to make some things work, or you would just have a strategy that would just kind of fall flat if you didn't get a particular piece. But that does mean you're sort of trying to build a singleton deck that is emulating this theme, which means you're, I think, going to end up, I should say, I don't think any of us have played this cube before. Is that correct?
Yeah, I have not.
I've not.
So we're being a little bit speculative here, but we're still going to try and be good Spikes about this in our Spikes Academy. So you are going to be trying to combine a little bit some of these strategies. So I think it's really cool here how we have Boggles, and that overlaps a little bit with Infect, because there's going to be some redundant pieces in terms of having a individual threat that can win if you pump it up, or has some kind of protection that's reasonable to suit up, or combo decks that can combine with value decks doing things like Kiki Jiki that also works with some of the Birthing Pod and things like that. When I look at this cube and sort of the structure, the way that it's laid out, having these different overlapping strategies, I go immediately to thinking about Ryan Sachs's article about paths, not picks. And I think that's really sort of the key to unlocking a successful deck here, is thinking not just about, I'm going to take the most powerful card in my deck, or the most powerful card out of the first couple picks, and then sort of figure out what feels open. I think it's really about figuring out what is your destination, what are the kinds of decks that are going to be the most powerful, because it is going to be very much about synergy, and finding the cards that are going to fit in a line to getting you to one of those optimal decks. I am not the person to tell you which those optimal decks are or what are the exact lines to get there, but that's kind of the gist of how I think we should be talking about this cube. What do you guys think?
Sounds about right to me. And I think the important thing for people that aren't scholars of Modern is that this is Modern, importantly, pre any Modern Horizons product.
Right, yeah.
The year 2015 might not mean a lot to you in terms of the history of Modern. It doesn't mean that much to me, but the fact that this is prior to cards printed specifically for Modern that had a huge impact on the format is the nostalgia we're going for. We're going for stuff before any of that stuff happened.
Right, and that's the core of it. There are some particular cards that have been included, like Stram Senior Edificer is kind of another alternate card to support the Boggle strategy, which I think is cool. It still supports the Boggle strategy while doing something a little bit different, giving you a little bit more texture, a different kind of payoff, but I don't think it breaks necessarily the spirit in the way that some people might think a lot of the sort of supplementary sets really changed fundamentally what the core archetypes of the format were.
I think that's the best way to look at it, because there really are, the more you dig in, the more you find cards that are printed after that year, but they all feel like they're within context of the cube. There's there's Teferi, Hero of Dominaria. That card was printed in 2018, which is, certainly after this cutoff, but it feels right at home in this cube, as does something like Shadow Summoning, which is from the Lord of the Rings set earlier this year, but it feels in context of making, okay, we're doing a black-white tokens deck. And there's a smattering of these cards, but unless you're going and digging to look for them, you're not going to notice them because they feel appropriate in this cube. And when you're drafting, as you're looking for those type of cards, you're not going to notice they're outside of the self-described identity of this cube. So I don't know. My favorite thing about this cube from a drafting standpoint is that I feel like the power band is very narrow. There's a lot of cards that are in the top tier, a lot in the middle tier, and a lot in the lower tier. And the top tier and the lower tier are not that far apart. They're all very, very, very close together. And that's why I think this is a great cube to cover, because there's not a lot of failure opportunities for drafters when you're drafting this cube, because most of the time, it's a 360 card cube, you're going to be able to put together a cohesive deck because everything is just so tight.
Yeah, that's definitely true, but I do think that there's going to be a lot determined on the synergy between those cards, because, if you draft a birthing pod, it can often do something, but if you really want to make it do a lot, you have to build and plan around it.
That's true, but with a 360 cube, that's a lot easier. I think a birthing pod and a 540 cube is close to unplayable sometimes, but in a 360 cube, when you're guaranteed to see every card, that reasonableness for a birthing pod goes way up.
Sure. I also expect it to play sort of similarly to Andy's Bun Magic Cube, just looking at a lot of the numbers and sort of distribution of the cards. It is a very different set of cards in terms of there's just not a lot of overlap. There's not a lot of individual cards that are going to be there, but there is still a pretty low curve here. Average mana value is around 2.5, which is just a little higher than the Bun Magic Cube. And there's a ton of fixing at around 20%. I think it is similarly going to be a pretty quick and focused environment.
I know Jabs is a listener, so Jabs, I see you. I like your mana fixing density, and I like your curve.
Are there triomes
You're
in
a man
here?
after my own heart. Are there triomes? Good question. They better not be. They don't feel like old modern.
No triomes, but there's 3 of every shockland.
Yeah, which, 3 of every shockland. I know a very handsome man that does the same thing in his cube. So, yeah.
3 of every shockland, 2 of every fetch. No, I'm here for it. I think it's great. I think I actually appreciate that. It's keeping within the context of the cube's design goals. And
for sure,
as a drafter, you're going to be able to get all of the things you need. And I love shocklands. They're just
they're such a great design.
They're probably the perfect Magic card, really, from a land perspective.
I agree.
But I love them in large quantities in this cube because it really makes the game go faster. You are playing shocklands. There's so many. There's 30 of them in this cube. There's 30 of them. There's 20 fetch lands in this cube. The games are going to start at a lower life total, and that gives so much room for aggressive decks to fight against some of these more combo-oriented stuff, and I just love that. I think that it's perfect in every single way of the construction of the cube and from a drafting perspective. That's something you need to keep in mind, because you should have a lot of success drafting this cube as an aggressive deck, and for that reason, if I was sitting down to draft this at CubeCon, I would be focused on trying to do as close to mono red as I could.
Interesting. Okay.
Mono red provides obviously a lot of ways to kill your opponent quickly, but it provides a significant amount of flexibility because several of the combo-oriented stuff is based around creatures. Splinter Twin, based around creatures. The Infect cards, based around creatures. So there's not many cards in this cube that only hit creatures. Most of the burn spells hit creatures or players. Mm-hmm. So I think red is just one of the most flexible colors in stopping your opponent's game plan and getting them dead before the higher mana value decks can come online. So in my opinion, and having never drafted this cube, that's what I would be looking at, and I would be trying to find some red cards early that could get me in that lane and try to cut that off going into pack 2.
Yeah, I think mono red in any fair cube is always going to be a safe-ish bet. It's a pretty reliable deck for all the reasons you mentioned. The cards are so flexible, and if you're going to be aggressive, then it sets the tempo for the table in a way that you have control over. In this cube, you also get the benefit of actually getting an entire combo just within your color in Kiki Jiki or Splinter Twin plus Zealous Conscripts. I don't know how many other colors actually have infinite within their entire color pie, so that's a benefit as well. I will say there's a couple cards here that are, to me, clearly pushing red to be more many-colored. So, one of the one-drops here is Curd Ape. That's not really your mono-red one-drop of choice. And we also have things like Tribal Flames, which is pushing you to be many colors in your red deck. So, seeing those cards makes me wonder if the designer intends for there to be a, true mono-red deck here. But, there's no one way to find out. You just got to draft it and see.
Yeah, my understanding based on just the description is that maybe those cards are not dedicated for the mono red deck, but maybe of a Naya Zoo deck. So there could be both of those at the same time.
Right.
And I mean, look, as far as I'm concerned, just because I have a Bloodbraid Elf and a Lightning Helix in my red deck doesn't
Still
mean I'm not
mono red.
Those are red cards, baby. So
As long as you're not playing any
fixing.
non-mountain basics, you're a mono red.
Right, exactly. There's so much fixing to go around. Like, you can pick up some of these really high-powered red cards, and let me tell you, there are a number of really high-powerful red cards. I mean, Kolaghan's Command, that also, came a little bit later, but found its way in the cube appropriately. No, that's 2015, so that's right in line. Perfect.
Yeah, that to me is like a quintessential, I think of the Jund deck of 2015 when I think of this era of Modern. I think of that, I think of Splinter Twin, and so to me, like, K-Command and Bloodbraid Elf are right up there in terms of, like, iconic Modern pieces. Was Deathrite Shaman legal in Modern at this point?
No.
Yeah, so Deathrite Shaman is in here just because it's a cool, awesome card. I see you again, Jazz.
Yeah, it's a
card
cube.
rules.
It's a cube, yeah. Yeah, but like, there's just, I'm looking at drafting. I'm looking at drafting red. And there's so many, like, God, there's even, of the hybrid cards, you have Rakdos Cackler, Murderous Redcap, Burning Tree Emissary.
Burning Tree Emissary is messed up.
I mean, I know it. That's when we talked about your regular cube before we did the Roto draft, I was like, Burning Tree Emissary, that seems like one of the better cards, and Anthony was like, people haven't really drafted it as much, but I know you just juiced up that section, so I'm a big Burning Tree fan.
People have changed on Burning Tree Emissary, and I've gotten kicked.
Well. People have changed on Burning Tree Emissary. Anyway, all of these red cards, this is where I want to be. I'm gonna just stop everybody from doing what they're doing and just kill them. Okay, that's what I want. There's plenty of good splash cards in red. There's infinite mana fixing. It's a 360 card cube. You're gonna be able to get it all. I can stop my opponent from doing whatever shenanigans they're doing, and I can turn the game on its head with very hyper aggressive speed. So that is firmly where I'm at. So when we get to this pack one, pick one. I'm a hunt down the best red card if there's one in the pack.
I think I see one for you in this pack that I'm looking at. You have your choice, I think, in this pack of what you want to do if you want to be mono red. Should we just jump to the pack? Anything else to say about this cube overall? I mean, I think being a little bit of a scholar of this era of Modern will at least tell you what the designer is going for. Maybe looking at a couple deck lists if you are not familiar with what these decks looked like. But overall, yeah, I think like you said, Justin, this is, for the most part, fair Magic. We have the Splinter Twin combos, floating around and stuff like that. But for the most part, we're playing fair Magic at a relatively low curve. And you're right to point out that the triple Shocklands is a very impactful thing on the overall meta of the environment. That's my own cube plays, and so I know from experience that changes the evaluation of a lot of cards, and it does make being an aggressive deck very different because you only got to count to 14 or whatever, not 20. All right, let's do this pack one, pick one then, and sink our teeth into it. This pack is Grim Lavamancer, Cartouche of Solidarity, Servo Exhibition, Step Links, Flooded Strand, Dark Confidant, Collected Company, Lavaclaw Reaches, Voice of Resurgence, Ornithopter, Inferno Titan, Gataxian Probe, Spell Snare, Goblin Guide, and Sword of Feast and Famine. Just to get out of the way, Justin, which of these red cards are you starting on?
Well, I'd like to shout out my favorite creature of all time, Dark Confidant. However, in this particular pack, Dark Confidant is going to be the best blocker for my pick, which is going to be Goblin Guide.
Yeah, I figured.
Yeah, we're getting in there. We're getting in there. And the great thing is, I'm passing a pack with the other two red cards as Grim Lavamancer and Inferno Titan. And Grim Lavamancer is not a high pick. It's going to be one of those.
Ooh, savage. Okay.
Yeah, I think realistically in this cube, like, there's a lot of it. Like, I don't think it's in the top tier of, like, it's not going to be a top 3 pick in pretty much any pack. But that means it's got a good shot to wheel back around to me. So I'm hopeful for that. But I'm taking Goblin Guide. And hopefully you have Dark Confidant, and then I attack you with Goblin Guide. You reveal a 5-drop off the top of your deck, and then know that you're either going to lose something, you're going to lose 5, you're going to take 2, you're going to lose your Dark Confidant.
Well, that's an easy
Goblin
trade
Guide.
at that point. If I reveal a 5 on top of my deck, easy. Take my Bob. It's done. You got it.
Yeah, I'm taking Goblin Guide. Easy. Ship me the red cards, baby.
It's funny, I think Lavamancer is maybe not that appealing, specifically in the mono red deck, but I actually do think that, again, if I can compare this to my cube as the most similar environment I do have experience with, Lavamancer does a lot of work there with double fetch lands. It's just way more often just turned on than perhaps people that have not played it in a fetch land rich environment are used to.
Oh yeah. I just don't think it's going to be, I just don't think it's a top 3 pick in pretty much any pack. So when you're outside, in my opinion, in a cube draft, when you're outside of a top 3 pick, those are the cards that you have a shot to get back.
Right.
So I feel like Grim Lavamancer's in that camp.
Out of curiosity, then, what else do you have flagged in this pack as the other 2 top 3 picks?
I would say Gataxian Probe for sure. That's probably my second after Goblin Guide. And strangely not Flooded Strand. Like, I'm usually up for taking a fetch land, but I feel like fixing is easy to get to. So I probably would take Goblin Guide, Gitaxian Robe, and then Collected Company, because I think that card's got a really high upside, but it does require some drafting effort.
That's a commitment card right there. You got to commit.
It's a commitment card, but it does have the opportunity of providing the most return on mana of just about any card in the cube. So I think if you're getting it early, you can focus on doing that.
This is the time to take it.
Again, that's like the third. That's the time to take it, but it's still like third in my pick order here.
Anthony, what are you taking out of this pack?
So I'll embarrass myself here and say that I was looking closely at Grim Lavamancer, specifically because I'm trying to do this thing and think about, like, what are the most powerful decks going to be like in this cube, and I think that aggressive red decks and also combo red decks are both going to be pretty present, and I think Grim Lavamancer is kind of flexible in that it can fit into both of those. There are a lot of other cards here that sort of speak to a very specific deck. Like, I could take Step Links and try and build a Naya Zoo deck, or Ornithopter and try and build Affinity for artifacts, but those cards are just a lot more narrow, and honestly, I don't necessarily have a lot of experience with those decks. I might not know how to get all the correct pieces. So I was definitely looking towards things like Grim Lavamancer and Dark Confidant, or Gitaxian Probe as just being slightly more flexible, but I guess I'm wrong, and I shouldn't take Grim Lavamancer.
No, I don't think that's the case. I don't think that's the case that you're wrong. That's the great thing about this cube is, like I said, I think the power band is really narrow. All of the cards in this pack, I feel like, are really close. Like, I think you could defend about 10 of these cards as first picks, including all of the cards you said. Realistically, and the cards that I think are not in contention to be first picks are like
very good in the right deck. Like, your Cartouche of Solidarity, your Ornithopter, those are really good in the deck that wants them.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely. Step Links, you have so many fetch lands in this cube, in a 360 cube. Yeah, I think there's a lot going on in this pack where a lot of people are going to be happy, no matter what. And if you open this pack, not pack 1, is it possible I would take Step Links or Cartouche or Flooded Strand, Grim Lavamancer, really Voice of Resurgence? And all of those cards I would take first pick, maybe not overall, but I would take them in a later pack if that's what I was doing. So yeah, I think that's always defensible.
For sure. What do you guys think about the Sword of Feast and Famine? That's a kind of card that I think used to be very popular in cubes that were especially a little bit slower and bigger and splashier. And I think a lot of the cubes that you and I, Andy, have been playing recently are a lot leaner, a lot more interactive. And so a lot of the swords just are actually not that impactful or just very swingy against the wrong color deck. So I just don't have much experience playing with them recently.
In this cube, I wouldn't want it until I had a Stoneforge Mystic, and then I would take it quite highly.
Got it.
Without Stoneforge Mystic, it's going to be... Honestly, I'd probably start it in the sideboard of most decks if I don't have a Stoneforge Mystic, unless I'm like chock full of cheap creatures. If I'm like the Naya Zoo deck and I'm always going to have something to equip it to, maybe. But mostly, I think I kind of agree that in a cube with this kind of curve and this amount of removal, you got to have your deck for a reason, other than just it's a good card that you want to equip and attack with.
Sure.
Yeah, there's only like 2 cards that say equipment in the whole cube. One Stoneforge, and I think SRAM's the other one. So you're getting it at face value. There's not a lot else going on unless you have one of those 2 cards. So I'm happier for it because I hate protection. I think it's like one of the worst keywords for cube, and I'm so glad we're like moving out of that.
Well, they brought it back. Is what I'm so surprised by. Like,
well, they didn't bring it back necessarily. They finished the cycle.
Which
people would have lost their minds had they printed a sword in the Sword of X and Y cycle that wasn't done exactly like the other one. So
it wasn't supposed to be a cycle. It was just 2 cool cards.
Magic players demand cycles.
Everything must be complete. I wasn't even talking about the swords. I just meant that, like, in the past 4 or 5 years, we have gotten more creatures with protection than we had gotten in the 4 or 5 years prior, which I was surprised by. But what are you going to do?
Yeah, but they're like protection from weird stuff. It's not like protection from red. It's not like protection from your deck.
Protection from humans.
Yeah, exactly.
I think there's a very open question in this pack that I know you have addressed, and that open question is Inferno Titan.
I love an Inferno Titan.
I also like an Inferno Titan.
Here's the thing about Inferno Titan. Looking at this cube list, it does, in curve and a lot of other ways, resemble a cube like mine, and this feels like the kind of cube where if you get to stick an Inferno Titan, you just win. So the question is, how often
if you resolve that card, you will win.
The question is, how often do you get to reserve an Inferno Titan in this cube? Is it reasonable? Is it frequent enough that, of all the cards in this pack, that is the one that you win the most? I mean, obviously it costs the most mana, so I certainly hope it's the case, but that is the one that has the by far biggest raw impact on the game. And there are definitely cubes where, I mean, the Live a Dream Cube is kind of an example of, like, you just want the most raw impact in your deck, right? You just want the most removal, board affecting stuff, give me that flip the deck over inevitability. Is there a world where that's viable in this cube? And by the very, here, I'm totally projecting. I'm reading into this a little bit. By the very light touch of high mana value stuff, like actual Baneslayer Angel, Inferno Titan, Thunderball Hellkite, Primeval Titan. By the very light touch of those things, I'm going to guess that these are kind of like the sometimes treats that this cube designer likes. They're like, sometimes I want this to be a thing, but I don't think it's the kind of environment where it's happening every time. Because if it was, I think it'd be more cards like this in the cube because they'd be at a premium. So Inferno Titan stands out to me in this pack for that reason, and I'm looking at it thinking, is this the kind of cube where I'm always going to have time to get to 6 mana in every single game, and I'm just going to wish I had Inferno Titan in my hand all the time? Or is it not that kind of cube? And ultimately, I'm just taking Flooded Strand. But here's what I'm doing. I'm taking Flooded Strand, hoping against hope to wheel that Step Links, because all I want to do is draft Nyazu. And I don't think you get into Nyazu by pack one pick wanting the Step Links, because you need to be at a table where that deck is going to be open, which I think is a lot of tables. Yeah. I think a lot of people don't understand or respect this deck, and you need a density of fetch lands to make that deck work, both to have your mana on time and also to turn on your things like Step Links. So I'm being responsible. I'm taking the Flooded Strand, and I'm hoping to wheel that Step Links so I can just force it, as Ryan Sachs would say. So just force that Nyazu deck that I want to draft so badly.
I think it's a good point. And you're absolutely right about making sure that you see that Step Links come back to say, okay, the coast is clear. I can go in on this now and eat your vegetables first.
Right. And then you're going to get the Loam Lion and the Curd Ape and everything else late once you take that Step Links. I do have I got one question for you, Jabs. I know you're listening. Why no Akoum Hellhound, the red Step Links? I wonder why that's excluded. I mean, obviously it's printed post-2015, but to your point, Justin, there's a lot of cards here that just fit the spirit of the Cube era, even if the card itself doesn't necessarily have that date in the bottom left-hand corner. So I wonder why there's no Akoum Hellhound here, and I was sad to see it not in the list.
There's only 360 cards, man. You got to make some concessions.
If you need some cuts to make for Akoum Hellhound, let me know, Jabs. I have some ideas. All right. Next up is Cartographia, which to date, I mean, I guess I should ask, Justin, I know that John put together a big cohort of community members to help design this cube and do some playtesting of it. Were either of you involved in the playtesting of this cube?
I was not.
I was also not.
Okay, well, bummer. Sorry, John. We're going to be totally speculating here on what it's like to draft this cube.
So I think we can speculate with a little bit of direction, though. I think, again, this cube has an interesting contrast to the previous one in that it is still a fairly synergistic cube. It has a couple different pillars of, mechanical themes that it's built around, but it's different in that it is not so discretely defined. Rather than these 12 different modern decks we're trying to emulate, it's really just focused around artifacts, enchantments, and lands.
Let you play in the space.
And there's, every color does a little bit in that space, and there's just a lot of all of these themes to be had. I think that artifacts and enchantments are maybe a little bit louder than the lands theme. John actually mentioned this on a recent episode of the Uber Bear podcast, which he was just on, and that makes sense just because of the kinds of cards that we've been getting printed. This features a lot of newer cards, which is another way this contrasts from some of the other cubes, and we've gotten in the Brothers War, in Neon Dynasty, and March of the Machines, just tons and tons of artifact stuff especially. So I think that my strategy for drafting this would be not to so much think about what is the ultimate deck that I'm trying to get to, but be a little bit more willing to just let the cards drive my decisions and look for power outliers, look for cards that really stand out, and know that a lot of the cards are going to support whatever I'm doing, so it's more just about looking at raw power level of cards.
Yeah, I think that's a great way to look at it, because and another discrepancy from the last cube that we covered, the power band here is wider.
It is, for sure.
By a pretty decent amount. So there is definitely an upper crust of cards here that I am going to be on the hunt for when I sit down to draft.
Which isn't necessarily a bad thing, of course. Like the disparity.
That's how most cubes are, honestly.
Yeah, that's true. And the disparity gives you a lot of positive aspects in the draft. It does give you more direction. Mm-hmm. It does give you clear signals when you see that a powerful card is still in the pack. And a lot of the lower tier cards are still going to support. You really just want as many non-creature spells to support your Third Path Iconoclast or enchantments to turn on your Archon of Sun's Grace, things like that. So all the cards are still going to be role players, but I do think that I really want to let the outliers, especially in just the early portion of the draft, drive where I'm going.
Yeah, I do think, again, this is purely speculative. I have read John's article about this. I have not yet listened to the episode of the UberCube podcast, so maybe I'm talking out of my ass here. But I do think that this cube is definitely striving for more synergy-focused decks, where you're combining cards so they're worth more than the sum of their parts. And so while it is true that I'm definitely looking for the power outliers in the early parts of the draft, I think as my deck starts to like form underneath me, I'm starting to look at ways that I can turn unsuspecting cards into power outliers in the context of my deck. Make my Scrap Trawler really, really good and not just a 3-mana 3/2. Like really turn some of these synergistic cards into the bombs that will allow me to take over the game when I can't just lean on the back of individually powerful cards.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely true. I guess more what I mean is just because so much of the cube is focused around a smaller number of those themes, it's going to be pretty easy to stay open longer. And, if I have my Archon of Sun's Grace, I'm going to be pretty confident that whatever, sort of secondary themes I'm going with, I'm going to end up being not punished for then focusing on enchantments over artifacts, for example.
Yes, there's not like there's a lot of A-B things where you have to get the other piece of this thing for it to make sense, for it to work. There's a lot of like big swaths of cards that interact in positive ways, and you're trying to kind of like piece together a curve and a density of threats and removal that also plays in these swaths of interactive cards into making a cohesive deck.
Yeah, that's what I'm seeing here as well, is you are trying to build the synergy like one piece at a time. And there's only a handful of cards that are like so overwhelmingly powerful that lead you in a direction that most of it is going to be you putting in the work in a draft to, if you start with Arcbound Ravager, you need to laser focus on all of these modular creatures or the artifact-centric stuff that puts counters on things. If you're starting with one of the more powerful cards in the cube, like Urza, Lord High Artificer, you are trying to mana ramp as much as possible so you can take advantage of that Urza. And it's kind of like it's a very synergy-based cube, but I think it's in a less intrusive way that you have to put together several pieces of synergies rather than just 2 and 3 cards throughout different portions of your deck, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. And just looking at the numbers a little bit, these themes really do stand out. 25% of the non-land cards are in artifacts, almost 25% are enchantments. There are not as many instant sorceries as a lot of these other cubes. And then looking at sort of the structure and tempo of it, it is a little bit slower than each of the previous ones, but we're nowhere near the Live the Dream cube at an average mana value of 2.75. Yeah, so I think that I'm sort of looking for, again, that kind of in-between. I feel like in a lot of ways, honestly, this feels like my own cube, the regular cube, where it is a lot of these like more sort of, this sort of like web of synergies rather than individual archetypes, and it is about sort of maximizing those.
Yeah, it feels a little more themed, I think, than the regular cube, in that there's got more flavor in these specific parts of Magic, where I feel like the regular cube strives to be neutral, right? It strives to be
it's completely regular.
It strives to be the tofu of cube that just takes on the flavor of whatever's around it. I do want to emphasize that I don't think that average mana value is a direct proxy for the speed of a game.
That is a great
just to say that.
Yeah. I was actually going to bring up the same point.
Because we do have a friend locally that has a all 1 and 2 mana value cube, and some of the games can get ridiculously grindy in that cube because nobody has a big bomb. Because in terms of absolute power, there's only so much a 2-mana card can do to the game. And so
that's a really good point.
It's not that that's necessarily going to say how fast the cube is going to play, but I think it does tell you the tempo at which you can expect to be deploying things from your hand, right? Like, I'll be playing spells at this sort of rate based on kind of the average mana value.
I think there's a deceptively wide scope of when the game could start in any particular game after you draft, because pretty much every color but blue has a decent like aggressive slant that you could get into, and the aggressive cards are the cards that more closely align with traditional. I don't want to say traditional cube cards as though this is not a traditional, but this is very high synergy and high theme. But the lower mana cost cards, as you would expect in just about any cube, are the ones that appear in a lot of other lists. So you could mess around and be like, I'm going to start on turn 3, and then someone's like, all right, cool, well, I'm going to play, Toolcraft Exemplar, and then I'll play Aethersworn Canvas on turn 2, and you're like, uh-oh, well, I did not think I was going to be playing this type of game. And now you've played 2 cards, and I've changed everything. So I think there's a decent amount of that. You got some cheap black discard that you could follow up with some early aggression, and that is present in pretty much every color but blue. So really need to, and artifacts, actually. That's pretty deep in artifacts, too. So
right. But to your point, I think that, in contrast to the Bun Magic Cube, where essentially every deck is a turn 1 deck in some way, you know that that's the tempo of the environment. There's plenty of decks here that
Right.
won't be that, and so there's going to be a wider range, I think, of speeds of decks based on what I'm looking at here.
Yeah,
I'm
very
also
much so.
seeing, I think this cube does the thing which I like when more synergistic cubes do, which is I think it has a less punishing dense suite of removal. There seems to be maybe not as much removal running around here as there are in like the Bud Magic cube or the Modern Darlings cube, and so you might be able to actually trust that you can put your synergistic pieces together without having it picked apart by most of your opponents. What that does tell me maybe is that removal is a slightly higher pick than it would be otherwise because there's less of it running around, so it's at more of a premium, and also I want to be able to take your synergistic pieces that you put together and try and pry them apart.
Break them apart, yeah.
Or, we also talked about there being a wider power level band. I want to have the removal spell for your big bomb. I want to be able to remove your Urza instead of just losing to it.
Yeah, this cube is probably significantly more. Well, if you're gonna have success in this cube, you probably need to be prepared to play more reactively than you are expecting, where everyone is trying to put their little synergy pieces together. But the people that are going to have the most success are going to be the ones that are using their Path to Exiles or Lightning Bolt type cards. They're cheap removal spells in the right spots while still advancing their game plan. So just like every other cube, when it seems like those might not be as good because you're trying to put together your synergy machine, that makes those cards even more powerful because that is going to be how the game turns in your favor in most cases.
All right, let's put this knowledge to use and dive in and do a pack one pick one of the Cartographia cube. I've got one pulled up here, and the pack contains Animating Fairy, Experimental Synthesizer, Mondrak Glory Dominus, Fetid Pools, Spider Food, Esper Sentinel, Ogrehead Helm, Glistening Dawn, Spirit Sister's Call, Restless Cottage, Psy Master Thopterist, Torch the Tower, Heliod the Radiant Dawn, Fatal Push, and Silent Clearing. I've made you two go first the past couple times. I guess I'll be vulnerable here and say what I'm looking at first out of this pack. I have to admit, I have a little bit of just like familiarity bias. I know Esper Sentinel is good in a lot of other cubes, and so I'm looking at it just as a card that I have played a bunch and been very happy with. So that card is definitely like jumping out at me. In terms of actually leaning into like the synergies that this environment allows, Psy Maverick Thopterist does also stand out. This is the kind of card that if your opponent doesn't have one of those, let's maybe assume relatively rare removal spells for your Psy, and your deck is full of artifacts, which it seems like it pretty much can be. Like if I decide from pack one I want to have artifacts in my deck, I think I'll be able to pretty much no matter what this table looks like. This is a card that can get out of hand and just take over the game on its own. And we do have a good cheap removal spell here in Fatal Push, and a maybe slightly less good but still viable one in Torch the Tower. So those are all the things that are jumping out at me. This cube does break Singleton for fetch lands, but there are none in this pack, which I think is good because we don't have to talk about whether or not we're taking a fetch land. And I'm in the mood to just take Psy and see if I can actually make it happen.
All those cards you mentioned stand out to me as well. Spider Food also is something I noticed just because it is removal for artifacts and enchantments, which is going to hit a ton of the artifact creatures and enchantment creatures as well.
3 mana sorcery removal. Get it out of here.
I'm not taking it.
Get
but
it right out of here.
I'm looking at it, and that's definitely something I think to be aware of is like at what point, at what density of artifact and enchantment creatures does this just become murder or, sorcery murder? And when do you actually want that? But the things that I'm actually really looking at are Psy Master Thopterist for, being like a clear signpost. I can really build around this from the beginning. It's going to be, I think, pretty powerful. Fatal Push because, like we're saying, there's some pretty big bombs here, and that's going to deal with a lot of things if you can get the Revolt triggered. I just am going to take Mondrak.
I was wondering if you were going to say Mondrak.
Yeah, you knew. I mean, this is just a 4-mana 4/4 with tons of upside. It can protect itself, I think, pretty easily. I'm hoping that I can just build a wide board in this cube, and this is both going to be rewarding me for doing that and allowing me to defend this card if I can.
Well, fortunately, neither of you have even mentioned the card that I think I'm going to take. So this will be fun.
We get some variety.
Yeah, we got some variety in this pack, and I will say this is the cube of all the cubes we've talked about where I'm the least confident in my pick. But that also makes me the most excited about my pick. So the second and third place card is Fatal Push and Psy Master Thopterist, respectively. Fatal Push for the reasons that I mentioned earlier, and Psy because it is one of those cards that, very easy signpost for you to start constructing your deck. Oh, but you just draft artifacts. Cool. But the card I think I'm going to take is Glistening Dawn.
I read
which
this
might come
card.
as a surprise. have either of you cast this card
I've
before?
never cast this card. So 4 mana, incubate X twice, where X is the number of lands you control, and then you have to pay 2 to flip each of those. So if I just cast this on turn 4, the next turn I can have 2 4/4s for another 4 mana, and it just scales up to bigger stuff.
Yeah.
So 2 5/5s, 2 6/6s, yeah.
Yeah, so I think within the context of this cube, it's a very basic card that I have a full understanding of how I can leverage it. And to me, in a cube that can take you in a lot of different directions, having a card that you're first picking, because I don't think that there's any crazy power outliers in this pack. So instead, what I would want to do is a card that I am sure of what its power level is. Is it going to be one of the very best cards in the cube? Probably not. But you know what? If I'm playing green, I know this is a card I can probably rely on to put significant pressure on my opponent or in the game. And that's kind of the thing that I'm looking for out of a first pick if I'm not getting something cheap utility like Fatal Push or like a fetch land, but there's no fetch lands in this pack. So I'm going to take Glistening Dawn. I'm going to take Glistening Dawn. I'm not going to look back. I probably will look back immediately, but I'm not going to look back right now.
It does make 2 artifacts, too. So,
Making 2 artifacts. I mean, that is the kind of card
artifacts.
that, you know, if you're trading off 1-for-1 with resources, and then suddenly you make 2 giant things, your opponent only has 1 removal spell in hand. Like, I've just been on the other side of
What?
that.
2
experience.
things?
2 things?
You can't do that.
It's not even
Yeah,
fair.
you took the spider food on your way back, and then I now have 2 tokens. What are you going to do about the other token?
Exactly. But wait, hear me out. What if you take Mondrak and you wheel the Glistening Dawn?
Then you're cooking.
Yeah.
Then you're cooking
You
with
got
oil
there, I
there,
think.
there.
I think it's a very interesting pack and a very interesting cube. I'm excited to draft it at CubeCon. I definitely plan on drafting this one while I'm there. Part of me just wonders if we're supposed to take Mondrak. I hope Anthony's not right, but I think maybe he could be right. It does a lot of stuff. Heliod also does a lot of stuff,
Heliod
too.
also,
There's
it's like
a lot of 4 mana 4/4s with a lot of text on them. I don't really want to read and figure out how good they are. So
Heliod's got a whole other magic card on the back.
it's got a whole other magic card.
If I remember correctly, the other magic card is pretty good too.
Yeah.
Well, at least it's
Heliod's really
in
strong.
magical Christmas land. Heliod is quite a card.
Yeah.
Yeah, it also is the only card here that provides just straight up card advantage.
That's a great point. Yeah.
Well, Glistening Dawn's a 2-for-1. We talked about it already.
Yeah, well, other than
that's
obviously
card
the right
advantage.
pick, which is Glistening Dawn. Yeah, I don't know. I think there's a lot. I think you could. I think there's very few wrong picks actually. I think Spider Food's the only one.
The only
That's
one.
only thing
Yeah.
that I think is like undefensible as a first pick.
Sometimes I think
And-
Anthony really likes to call out the worst card in the pack just because
Just to look at it. Just look at it over
he
there.
just wants to see. I will say I also think I don't see how you can justify taking Animating Fairy because even if you're playing that deck, there's like Esper Sentinel and Psy in this pack.
Well,
For
you're taking
it.
Psy. Yeah, that's fair. Yeah, you're never gonna take it over Psy.
Yeah.
So okay, so two cards.
And
Yeah.
just so we can mention every card, I'm looking at Spirit Sister's Call, and I'm like,
Stop
I'm
it.
not.
Stop looking
I'm
at
not
it. Too much
doing
text.
this. I'm not doing this. It has too much text. But I will. I'm gonna be excited to see somebody else try and beat me with it.
It's got cool art.
I'm gonna be. It has awesome art. I'm gonna be real with you. I've not read all of the text on that card, but I decided after 2.5 lines I didn't want to, so I was hoping no one brought it up.
Yeah.
They should add a
still haven't read it.
little reminder, like, no, it gets better. We like keep reading. This is a good one.
All right. Here's an idea on
An
Magic
an
cards.
abstract first.
No, on Magic cards, all upside is highlighted in like a green highlighter, and all downside is highlighted in like a red highlighter.
It would be all green in
So-
2023.
So, well, no, I mean, there's some cards with wait.
They don't
all
make
green
they don't make
2023. I
Lord
think-
Tresser horns anymore.
No, that's a
All
card.
green. I think that was their motto in 2019 when
Yeah.
they were making sure that every green card was the best card they'd ever printed.
They could just highlight the mana cost on Spider Food.
Fun
Yes.
fact: since you've last read Questing Beast, it has another ability.
It just keeps going.
Yeah.
You forgot to unroll the extension.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so we have all over the place for this one. What do we have next?
Next up is the Creative Cube, which I know you have drafted, Justin, so I'll let you lead the conversation on this one.
I have. This is a cube that is by my good friend Mike Kerby. We worked together when we both worked at Star City Games, a bit ago. And I have drafted this cube IRL, I don't know, a dozen or more times. And I like it quite a bit. It is a very, 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 very tight cube. It is high synergy based. And I'm gonna read Mike's core vision because it says it better than I could. The Creative Cube provides players with an environment that encourages exploration and innovation. Strong decks lean heavily on cross synergies among their themes, though players will still find success while drafting traditional aggro, mid-range, and control decks. Additionally, the Cube strives to keep the power level high to allow for exciting gameplay. And the thing that I really want to focus on here is strong decks lean heavily on cross synergies among their themes. And that, in my experience, has been the most successful thing that I do, and it's the thing that I now try to do in every single time that I play this cube in real life. I do want to point out one other thing, because we might go over some of the cards. All of the basic lands in this cube are snow lands. So, snow is not like
important thing to know.
It is. Snow is not like a core theme, but all of the really good snow cards are here. So you're not drafting as much of a snow deck as being able to draft cards that are very powerful, like the Baleful Strix like Snake. I can't remember the name of it off the top of my head. I'm trying to scroll to find it.
Icefang
Quaddle.
Icefang Coatl. You have Icefang Coatl. You have the Black Sweeper, which I'm also
Winter's Night or Dead of Winter.
Blood on the Snow. That you can destroy everything and then bring something back.
Isn't there a different Snow Matters board wipe in black?
There is. It's three. That's a three mana board wipe.
Yeah, that one's not here.
That one is not here. No, Toxic Deluge is the 3 mana one of choice. And then you have, like aggressive cards like Ice Hide Golem, which you can essentially play in every deck that you could just cast off of any basic land. So, anyway, the thing that I always try to look for in this cube is outlined exactly in this core vision, which is leaning on cross synergies. So most of the time, I am trying to put together small 2 and 3 card combinations and then weave those together throughout the entirety of the deck. I don't want to boost myself up too much. I'm probably responsible. I don't want to say probably, because Mike's going to be like, you're absolutely not.
Come on, talk yourself up.
All right, well, I will say...
Let Kerby in and suck you up and spit you out and assume your power.
Well, here I will say something factual. So Kerby he keeps track of everyone that's drafted the cube and their record. But he has a decay on your percentage. So the longer you go without playing the cube, the more that decays. So I moved away from Roanoke.
This is great nerdy stuff.
Wait, so there's like a ranking of like the best players of this cube of all time, and it's got a like weighted number of drafts and record over time. Yeah, okay,
that is
interesting.
Correct. So only very recently did I decay out of having the best record in this cube of all in history.
And you moved away 3 years ago, right?
Yes.
2 years ago?
No, a year ago.
Just a year ago. Okay.
Just a year ago. Yeah. So it took a while, but I traditionally had done very well and have most of the time if I drafted a deck and won, not 100% of the cards that I won would be in the cube the next time I played the cube.
Mm-hmm.
So
that's how you know you not only won, but you made some enemies along the way.
That's right. So one of the things that I like to do in this cube is really try to just put together these like 2 and 3 mana combination cards.
One thing I do want to call out about this cube, just because we haven't talked about it yet, this is actually true of a couple of the cubes here. I think people should take a second look at every Warhammer 40k card they see in any pack, in any cube, because this was not a set that was in Standard, so people are not used to these cards having any kind of reputation from Constructed Magic, and a lot of them are just really kind of messed up. This cube in particular has Triarch Praetorian, Royal Warden, Hormungaunt, Horde, Moloch, and Night Scythe in it. All of these cards, I think, are among some of the like best cards in this cube in terms of like raw rate, and if you have not been either playing, I guess, a lot of 40k commander decks or playing cubes with these cards in them, you probably haven't heard of them before, but Royal Warden is just a 5-mana 3/2 that makes 2 2/2s that has Unearth for 3 and a black. It's a really, really good rate, and the same is true of Night Scythe, just cards that are really efficient that I think are worth a second look if you are not familiar with them.
Those are the cards that I was just reading were the Warhammer cards. So I'm like, let me look at this. It was the Triarch Praetorian.
Triarch Praetorian is kind of screwed up. It's 2 mana, 2/1 flyer that you can unearth for 5 mana, and when you do unearth it, you also draw 2 and lose 2. So it's just a Muldrifter. It's a 2 mana, 2/1 flyer that dies into a Muldrifter. It's pretty good.
Yeah, that's pretty solid. It's pretty solid. Yeah. So there's one of the things that I really like about this cube is the diversity of spreading archetypes over so many different colors, so you can approach them from different angles. So like you could have. Let's see. So you have a card like Benny Brack's Zoologist. You guys familiar with this card? This is a commander card from a couple years ago.
I
Maybe
am
it was
not.
last year.
I will read it now.
I'll read it. I'll take the reading duties here. So Benny Brax is a 3/2 elf druid for 3 and a white, and it says at the beginning of each end step, if you create a token this turn, draw a card, but it has Convoke. So obviously, it is encouraging you to play tokens both before Benny Brax and after Benny Brax. But there's also a significant sacrifice theme in the cube, not just in black, but also in red, and also even a little bit in green with some of the crossover cards like Chatterfang and Vraska, Golgari Queen, and Ravenous Squirrel. So you have that along with all of the things that you would expect from black, and then there's a handful of red stuff too that lets you sacrifice things. So you can really build a deck like that is focused on having this as kind of a key piece, but you can angle it to include any other combination of cards that you want from any colors that you're in that happen to overlap with your other themes that you have for your deck.
Yeah, I feel like this cube is on the spectrum of getting closer to like the Live the Dream cube in terms of the curve and the amount of greed you can have in your deck. There's a lot of 5, 6, 7, even 8 mana cards in this cube that I assume are relatively castable, or I can get them into play, and so I think a big part of that is just figuring out how many of those you want and how reliably can you actually cast them, because a card like Atali Primal Conqueror or Ugin the Spirit Dragon is going to take over any game you can play it, so it's that question again of just how many of those can you afford in your deck to still keep up with the speed of the game and not fall behind in the early turns, and then get to actually start swinging these big haymakers late.
Yeah, I think that this is overall just going to be one of the more difficult cubes to draft because a lot of the cards are just not necessarily iconic cards that we've seen in a lot of cubes. There are a bunch of newer things, things from supplemental sets, and how these cards are going to perform depends so much on the cards around them. So a lot of things say, whenever you make a token, draw a card. How good is that really depends on how consistently you can make tokens. And going into this, a lot of people are just not going to have that intimate context to be able to evaluate things. So it is going to take a lot of just making an assessment as you're going, unless you're willing to do a lot of pre-research. And yeah, that's just going to be, I think, a really interesting draft experience.
I think a good strategy for this type of cube is to focus not necessarily on the colors of what you were drafting, but eventually you want to do that because you want to have a successful deck that can cast spells, but focus on the text box of the cards that you are picking highly, and then try to just soak up those cards, and then as you go through, identify what lane you want to go down from a color perspective, because I identified tokens, and you can do the same with artifacts that go over 4 or even 5 colors. So giving yourself the opportunity to be in 3-color decks on a more regular basis is going to allow for the most powerful versions of those decks, as long as you don't narrow yourself into colors too early. Kind of like you said, this is like a lower curving Live the Dream type cube, but because of that, you have the ability to really branch out from a creativity perspective, and of course that's the name of the cube, the creative cube, a creativity perspective to identify ways to put those combinations of cards together.
Yeah, I think slightly lower curving Live the Dream cube is maybe my shorthand for this cube at this point. And looking at the list, there are definitely some dreams to be lived. I mean, again, I think deciding just how much ambition you're going to have in terms of how big of a spell you can cast is going to be a big question in drafting and building your deck here. And I really appreciate there's a high density, it seems like, of these cards that are kind of modal, and they can be a huge expensive bomb, or they can be something else. We have, appears, the full cycle, maybe not the white one, of the basic land cyclers from the Lord of the Rings set. So you have Oliphant and Troll of Khazad-dûm and Lorien Revealed. All these cards can be big haymakers, or they can just be a land. We also have a lot of prototype cards from March of the Machine, so your Phyrexian Flesh Gorgers and your Steel Seraphs, which are, big 6 and 7 mana spells, but also have a cheaper mode. So looking at cards like that to give you outs if you get to that part of the game where you're just swinging giant hammers back and forth at each other, but not have them be dead cards early is, I think, a good spot to be.
And there's definitely a lot of those cards. You have I don't know if it's a cube staple at this point, but Twin Shot Sniper, which some people are playing over Flame Tongue Kavu, something like a Bramble Familiar or other adventure cards where you really are able to go large or small depending on the game state. And because there's a huge amount of those, and you identified that there's no white Planecycler.
Yeah, the
that card,
Eagles
why is that
of something.
Card just, yeah, that card is just worse than the rest. And not because it gets a plains, which is, again, as we've established, the worst basic land, but like the card itself is just like not as good as the other 4. I just find that odd.
Yeah, something's got to be the worst card in a cycle. I think it's hard to balance those things.
I mean, we've come so far. 30 years later, still got to be white cards.
6 mana, 3/3.
I mean, it has been.
It gives you a little bit of a... I mean, first strike and +1/+0. I don't know. I think it probably requires... Whenever I think a card is like the worst of a cycle, I'm like, how good is this in Commander? Because that's a context I'm very rarely thinking about cards, and that one might be a lot more appealing in Commander than something like the Troll of Khazad Doom, which I think in one-on-one heads-up Magic is one of the more appealing options.
Well, yeah, maybe, but you can Swamp Cycle the Troll and then reanimate it immediately.
Is that good in Commander? Does that do anything? Just
Good
attack
Legacy.
you for 6? It's definitely good in Legacy. For sure good in Legacy.
I don't know. Anyway,
All right, we're all over the place with this cube. This is a creative
we're all
cube.
over the place with cube.
It's getting late, and we're doing a creative podcast about it. Let's jump to our pack 1, pick 1, and let the rubber hit the road here.
Great.
Our pack is Silent Clearing, Cathartic Pyre, Briar Bridge Tracker, Poppet Stitcher, Hidetsugu, and Kairi? Does anyone know how to pronounce that name?
Kairi.
Kairi?
Hidetsugu and Kairi.
There you go. Iganjo, Seed of the Empire, Lightning Helix, Samwise Gamgee, Hangerback Walker, Soul Guide Lantern, Jadar, Ghoul Caller of Nephalia, Wooded Foothills, Watery Grave, Dragonwing Glider, and Prismatic Ending. Well, Mr. Top of the trophy leaderboard, what are you taking out of this pack?
So something stands out. Oh,
You're not the top of the trophy leaderboard.
Anthony,
Excuse
you
me.
right at me.
There's only one person in this
I
room.
didn't
What am I
listen to
supposed
what
to
you
do?
said.
Go ahead, Anthony.
No, go for it.
He's all bashful now.
I think I'm going to fairly easily take Prismatic Ending, which is not exciting, but it is a card that I end up in 3 and 4 color decks in this cube a lot. So Prismatic Ending is definitely a premier removal spell. But if I'm feeling frisky and I want to just get people dead, I'm going to take Jadar. Then it's actually pretty close between Prismatic Ending and Jadar. I am going to take Prismatic Ending, but Jadar is definitely my number 2 here because it's one of the most efficient token makers and certainly one of the most aggressive.
I'm taking Wooded Foothills because I'm a coward and I don't want to commit to anything in a cube I don't know much about yet.
That is coward.
I think you also find
I'll agree.
I tend to prioritize fixing lands higher than most. So yeah, here, I mean, nothing is jumping out at me as like a huge bomb. So I'm just going to take the Wooded Foothills and
you're gonna take that Wooded Foothills and wish you had that Prismatic Ending later.
I'm gonna re-roll on the next pack and see what that pack has for me. Because is there some combo around Samwise Gamgee? Is that a combo card or is that the other Samwise card that is a combo?
No, it's not necessarily a combo as it is a high functioning inevitability machine.
Right. Maybe it's Samwise the Stout-Hearted. I thought there was like a relatively appealing high power combo around one of the Samwise cards that
the mono white Sam is the one you're
That's the
talking
one that has a appealing combo people are like trying to brew and constructed.
Right, yeah, because it brings a card back that died this turn.
Yeah.
Yeah. So but this Sam makes a bunch of food and then you can sacrifice food to bring a historic thing back, and there is a legendary theme. Really?
That's just not. I'm not into that.
I really like that card.
I mean, it's fine. I just don't want to make a bunch of food tokens. I don't know.
Yeah, but you didn't even let me say the good part.
Right. Sorry. Go ahead.
You get to return a historic card from your graveyard. It's not making food to gain life. Nobody wants to do that. If I wanted to gain life, I'd take the red card in the pack. Lightning Helix, by the way.
Wow. No respect for Dragonwing Glider.
Wow.
Dragonwing Glider's fine, but Lightning Helix, look, there's no Dragonwing Glider video on YouTube where someone top decks it and everyone screams, okay?
So far. Not yet. Just wait till we cover this Cube at CubeCon. It's a
Dragonwing Glider! That's true. That's true.
I mean, that's
is a foreshadowing, everyone.
That is a card, interestingly, that will definitely kill you in top deck mode, the Dragonwing Glider, so maybe it matters.
It sure will. It's sure hard to get with Prismatic Ending, too. Actually, it's not. Because you just get the
token. Yeah, it's free.
Yeah, Prismatic Ending, that's the card. That's the pick here.
Anthony, what are you taking?
So the thing that jumped out to me immediately was actually Poppet Stitcher. This is also just a big token generator. It does a whole lot, but looking over the list, it just feels like it might be difficult to cast a lot of instant sorceries, and I just confirmed that looking at our numbers, this is actually the cube that has the highest percentage of creatures of any of them at 60%, and it's very light on instant sorceries, so I'm going to move off Poppet Stitcher for those reasons. The next cards that stood out to me were, I feel better about this one, were also Prismatic Ending as the best removal spell, which is in these synergistic contexts, great for all the reasons we've already talked about. And Jadar is just like the cheapest, most efficient thing that says, make a bunch of resource that you can use in these kinds of synergistic contexts. So I think I'm starting on Jadar between those. And Dragonwing Glider also did stand out to me as a card that I think is very powerful and has some flexibility in terms of it makes a token. It's an artifact. You can stick that glider on other things, and it can just get your opponent dead. So I'm on Jadar, and I feel good about it.
I feel like this is the cube equivalent of the waiter comes to you at a restaurant, and you're like, they ask you what you want, and you're like, give me a minute. And then as soon as you let the next person go, you realize what you want, and then they order the exact thing you were going to order. And then you're like,
see, I have no problem ordering the same thing. Like, this is the thing I find so weird when people are like, oh, I don't want to order the same thing as anybody else.
But in this restaurant, they say, no, they already took that.
Yeah,
what do you take
in this
that
restaurant, you can't actually.
Everyone knows there's already one of those. There's only one of those to go around.
Yeah.
We have one potato pave in the kitchen, and that person has already ordered it. And we can't make another one.
Andy, so to be clear, let's say there were 8 people sitting down eating.
There's 8 people sitting down eating.
If the 6 other people say the same thing, you wouldn't even think about it. You wouldn't even consider getting something different, just from a psychology point of view.
Well, if the 6 other people also ordered it, it's got to be the best thing on the menu at that point.
Yeah, that's a
fair.
totally
That's
different
a fair.
situation.
That's a fair argument.
Yeah, I don't know.
What if it's like ham sandwich? Well, I'll take ham sandwiches. You're like, I was going to get the ham sandwich.
The only
Don't
context
get Andy started on ham.
Ham sandwiches are the best place for ham. The only context in which I will consider like diversifying my order based on the meta of the orders at the table is when there's explicitly a plan to share a lot of food, and it's like, well, we want more diversity at the table
If you
for
see
everybody's
no one's
benefit.
gotten fries for the table yet.
Oh, I always order fries for the table.
You got
a couple fries for the table, depending on how many people are there.
This is the important stuff that people are really tuning in to find
2
out.
hours in, this is when we get to the important stuff.
It's a little
how
brief
many fries to
intermission
order for the
of
table.
dinner draft.
Ooh, good one, Anthony. Wow, that sure was great. Like I said in the intro, we broke this episode up into 2 retroactively, so I am here alone to do a little outro for this episode. One last reminder to check out luckypaper.co/shop if you are attending CubeCon, or if you have a friend that is attending CubeCon and you might want a beautiful print of the cube map to commemorate it. You've only got a few days from the day this episode is released, so don't miss out. It's a mere 3 weeks to CubeCon. Can't wait to see a lot of you there. Tune in next week for the rest of our conversation with Justin. As you might be able to tell, as the night goes on, we're getting a little more punchy, and that trend may or may not continue in the second chapter. All of our music is produced by DJ James Nasty. All the Magic cards are produced by Wizards of the Coast. This show is produced by Anthony, Justin, and I thinking really hard about Magic cards, and then speaking into microphones about it, and then me editing it down into 2 separate episodes afterwards because 4 hours is much too long for a podcast episode. Thanks for tuning in.